Did you know that parents rank teaching financial literacy as the toughest life skill? That's where Greenlight comes in, the debit card and money app made for families. With Greenlight, you can send money to kids quickly, set up chores, automate allowance, and track spending with real-time notifications. Kids learn how to earn, save, and spend responsibly, while parents have peace of mind knowing smart money habits are being built with guardrails in place. Try Greenlight risk-free today at greenlight.com/Wondery. That's greenlight.com/Wondery.
Did you just hear those ads? Do you not want to? Because Crimelines is available ad-free on Supercast, Patreon, and Apple subscriptions. You will also get access to my other twice-monthly podcast, Beyond the Files. That's where I take cases that were covered on Forensic Files and tell you the rest of the story. Links to those platforms are in the show notes. Around Christmas time 2013, investigators in the Arlington, Washington area got notified that a recently arrested car thief wanted to talk to them. He told them he knew about a decades-old murder that occurred on a rural property, but this was a crime the police had no idea even happened. I'm Charlie, and welcome to Crimelines. Hello, and welcome to Crimelines. This week, we are covering a case that will have some parallels to a recent episode, but we're going to see what happens when different decisions are made by investigators. The truth is, in the case we're talking about today, they're lucky it was solved, because if it was up to the deputy who was first alerted to it, nothing would have happened. So we are going to start with Byron Wright, who was born in Washington in May of 1951. When he was pretty young, his father abandoned the family pretty much entirely, leaving his wife to raise 4 kids entirely on her own. In the 1950s and 60s, there were not a lot of resources for single parents, and beyond that, Byron's mom had MS. A large number of entry-level jobs were impossible for her to even do, and few of them would pay her enough to support 4 kids comfortably. So they were raised in poverty, and Byron had to take on a caretaking role for his siblings as his mother's health deteriorated. Eventually, Byron and his siblings were sent to live with relatives outside of Seattle. Byron was a teenager at that point, and he found a real passion in tinkering with machines. He started collecting spare parts to make his siblings' bicycles, and eventually, this interest led him to be into cars. Byron was a car guy in the sense that he loved the mechanics, but he was also a car guy in that he loved racing. He was able to pursue these interests without a lot of money because he taught himself how to fix pretty much anything. After high school, Byron did 4 years in the Coast Guard, which got him both a life experience and training. When he returned to Washington, he went to work for Boeing doing aircraft assembly. And in so many ways, this was a dream job for Byron. He got to work with his hands, and he was making decent money. He was able to buy cars along the way, eventually owning 8 cars, with a Corvette Stingray probably being the top of his collection. To have space for his cars and his tinkering with those cars, Byron bought some land near Arlington, Washington. The property had a small home on it, but it also had a large shop in the back. This garage shop was probably bigger than the house, which was fine with Byron because it was just him and his cars. He was in his 40s, but had not married or had children. For Byron, his nieces were his children. He made it to every birthday party and every holiday. One of his nieces said that it was like they had 2 great dads in their life, their father and their Uncle Byron. Then one Thanksgiving in the mid-1990s, Byron came to dinner with a girlfriend named Michelle. The two had met in 1994 or 95 when Byron was about 43 and Michelle was around 29. Michelle was very pretty and very charismatic, and the family thought she seemed great. She was able to jump into the conversation when it turned to cars, which seemed pretty perfect for a guy like Byron. And most important to his family, Byron seemed very happy. Michelle had been married before, and she had an 8-year-old daughter who she shared with her ex-husband, George. George and their daughter have both done interviews about their experiences with Michelle, so we have quite a bit of insight into their dynamic that Byron was walking into. George and Michelle met in high school, but Michelle was pretty rebellious, especially in the eyes of her strict mother, so when she was only about 17 or 18, she left home to go live with George and have some freedom. George soon found out that Michelle's partying that she got in trouble for at home was actually a problem on the whole. After supporting her for a couple of years with Michelle not doing much to contribute, he broke things off, but then she came to him a few weeks later to let him know she was pregnant. It was the mid-1980s, and George had been raised like a lot of people in that time, that getting married was the right thing to do. So in December of 1985, the two married, and their daughter, who we will call Jennifer in this episode, was born in June of 1986. At first, it seemed like Michelle had settled into pregnancy and then motherhood rather well. The irresponsibility George saw in their early relationship mellowed out now that she couldn't be out partying. George would go out to work and Michelle would stay home to cook and clean, and then, after their daughter was born, take care of her. And that lasted less than a year. When Jennifer was around 5 months old, Michelle turned 21. Instead of partying underage at a friend's house, she could go out to the bar or the casino to drink. Soon after her birthday, Michelle started handing George the baby after he got home from work, and then she would head out to the bar with her friends. This homemaker's life was not working out for Michelle. Michelle eventually left George, and to his surprise, she took their daughter with her. Michelle didn't seem like she would want the responsibility of being a single mother, but she found somewhere to live, she got a job as a server, and they ironed out a custody agreement during the divorce. Michelle was given primary custody, which was pretty common in the late 1980s, but George had liberal visitation. Basically, whenever he wanted to see his daughter, he could. And sometimes Michelle would just drop Jennifer off when she wanted to go out, even at times George didn't request it. Now, he didn't mind because more time with his daughter was fine with him, but it started to feel like Michelle only wanted primary custody because she wanted the child support. As an adult, Jennifer has said that Michelle showed very little interest in what was happening in her life, and the nights she would not drop her off with George, Michelle would just leave her home alone, even though she was far too young for that. Meeting Byron, though, really seemed to change things for Michelle. She moved in with him and started spending a lot more time at home since Byron himself was a homebody. She got into gardening and reading, so it felt like maybe she was turning over a new leaf again. George and his new wife noticed that Jennifer still wasn't entirely thrilled about going home after visits, but Jennifer has said that Byron was a nice guy. It was just a different life at home with her dad, where she had 2 attentive parents and siblings versus her mom's place. One was an active family, whereas with her mom, it was just them. Jennifer only met Byron's family once or twice because after his relationship with Michelle got serious, Byron saw less and less of his family. When he and Michelle married in 2000, he didn't even tell his family until after. But he wasn't the only one. Michelle didn't tell her own daughter that they got married until the small wedding had already taken place. And after the wedding, Byron's family hardly saw him. His youngest sister kept trying, sending him cards, invitations to his niece's birthday parties, and calls to check in. She didn't often get to talk to him and wondered if her cards and messages ever even made it to him or if they were getting intercepted by this new wife. It wasn't just family that Byron was isolated from after getting involved with Michelle, it was friends too. His best friend would see him sometimes and they'd make vague plans to get together soon, but then those plans would never materialize. People were left wondering if they did something to make Byron pull away, or was it just a byproduct of him having a wife and a stepdaughter who he was focused on? Or was Michelle actually keeping him away from people? They didn't know. Fast forward a few years into their marriage, and around the time Michelle and George's daughter was turning 18, so we're talking 2004. George and his wife were planning a family trip to Ireland, and it's not a family trip if you don't include everyone, so they really wanted to take Jennifer with them. Though she would be 18 at the time the trip occurred, she was 17 when they were planning things, and you can't get a passport for a minor without parental consent. They were pleasantly surprised when Jennifer asked Michelle about it, and she actually said yes, and without hesitation. So Jennifer and George and the family enjoyed their time abroad in September of 2004. When Jennifer got back in late September, she was really excited to tell her mom all about the trip, so she headed home almost right away. When she got there, Michelle broke the news to Jennifer that something big had happened while she was gone. Her stepfather, Byron, had rather abruptly left them. Michelle said that he took some clothes and a hygiene kit with him, but that was about all. He left a note explaining that he had met another woman on the internet, a younger, red-headed woman in her 20s, and he was going to start a new life with this other woman. Jennifer was shocked. Byron was such a homebody and not the type to want to move outside of his comfort zone. His cars, his house, the job he had for over 20 years, that was his life, and he just walked away from all of it. According to Michelle, Byron also said that she could keep everything because, 1, the new woman he was with was wealthy and could take care of everything for him, and 2, he felt bad leaving Michelle high and dry, so giving her the cars and the money and the paid-off property would be a way to assuage his guilt a bit. Jennifer told her dad and stepmom about Byron leaving for another woman, and they didn't think it sounded right. Not that all age gap relationships are about money, but it's not common for a 50-something-year-old man to have a 20-something-year-old wealthy woman wanting to financially support him. When there is a financial incentive in relationships like this, it is usually the other way around. So they wondered what the real story was. Not that they thought anything nefarious had happened, but it sounds like they definitely didn't think this was the true story about why Byron left. That said, it wasn't really their business to pry, and now that Jennifer was 18 and their relationship with her did not require contact with Michelle, they were good, so they let it go. Michelle then hired an attorney to pursue a divorce from Byron. She did not know how to handle it because she didn't know where Byron was. She was told she could file for divorce and then ask the court for something called a service of summons by publication. This is used when a defendant cannot be found after a diligent effort to find them was made. You publish it in the newspaper instead of serving them personally. So that is what Michelle did, and eventually she was granted a divorce. In the ruling, she was given the house and that property, an adjoining property that Byron also owned, his car collection, and half of his retirement account. Byron's family knew nothing about him supposedly running off or getting a divorce until May of 2006, when his sister sent him a birthday card and Michelle called to tell her that Byron didn't live there anymore. She explained how he had left, though the story was a little different this time. She told Byron's sister that he left with a younger coworker who he had been having an affair with, and they were headed to Wisconsin. The family was surprised that Byron acted that way towards his wife, cheating on her and leaving her, and they were also surprised that he never contacted any of them to let them know he moved or to give them his new phone number or address. Eventually, his sister Sharon told a friend about this weird situation with her brother, and it didn't sit right, so this friend decided to look into things. After not being able to find Byron on the internet at all, he ended up calling Boeing, Byron's employer for over 20 years, thinking that they might have some information. Maybe they knew where to mail his last check, maybe he used them for a job reference and they could track him down that way. But Boeing couldn't help because Byron never actually quit. He simply stopped showing up and they fired him because of it. No one there had any direct contact with him. He was there for work one day in September of 2004, and then the next day, he didn't come back. It's that time again. The holiday shopping season has officially begun, and Uncommon Goods takes the stress out of gifting with thousands of unique, high-quality finds you won't see anywhere else. What I really like about Uncommon Goods is that they look for products that are high quality, unique, and often handmade or made in the United States. They're doing the curating for you. I don't know if you do ornaments for your kids every year, but we do, and I was so glad to see that Uncommon Goods has so many items that you can personalize or customize. Things from wood slice pet portraits to names on snowflakes. They had so many unique options, and so many of them are customizable, making them a really great gift. And what's great is Uncommon Goods has something for everyone. Maybe you're not looking for ornaments, but if you're looking for a gift for a mom or a teenager or a history buff or a football fan, you're going to find thousands of new gift ideas that you're not going to find anywhere else. And when you shop at Uncommon Goods, you are supporting artists and small independent businesses. But just a little warning that many of their handcrafted products are made in small batches, so shop now before they sell out this holiday season. And with every purchase you make at Uncommon Goods, they give back $1 to a nonprofit partner of your choice. So don't wait, cross those names off your list before the rush. To get 15% off your next gift, go to uncommongoods.com/crimelines. That's uncommongoods.com/crimelines for 15% off. Uncommon Goods, we're all out of the ordinary.
Every day, the world gets a little weirder and a lot more awesome. Cool Stuff Daily takes a look at everything from mining in space to the latest in the fight against cancer to how AI is, basically changing everything. It's all the cool stuff you didn't know you needed to know. Join us for Cool Stuff Daily as we take a quick look at science, tech, and the wait, what stories that make you sound way smarter at dinner. Subscribe to Cool Stuff Daily now because the future's happening fast and it's way too fun to miss.
This friend suggested to Sharon that she report Byron missing. By this point, it was 2009, and no one had heard from him in almost 5 years. Sharon didn't have much information other than what Michelle told her, so she called the sheriff's department to report it. Up to this point, this sounds a lot like the Cody Bowles case from a couple weeks ago. Again, that's the one where the file messed up, so go try to listen to it if you haven't gone back to it. But it was such a similar situation. The wife says the husband ran off, and his family is concerned over the lack of contact. In that case, a missing persons report was filed, and then they went right out to the house to ask Cody's wife about his whereabouts, and they started investigating. Within months, they had the whole thing solved. In this case, the sheriff's deputy taking the report said adults are allowed to leave if they want. He did a quick search to see if Byron had maybe gotten a driver's license somewhere else in the United States, and he found that he hadn't. Byron's Washington license had expired, and this is a car guy, so a car guy going without a driver's license didn't make a lot of sense. So here's another point where the deputy could say, let's look into this a little bit more. But he didn't. And Byron was not entered as a missing person. That left to Byron's family to figure this out on their own. Maybe Byron didn't have a United States driver's license because he and this new girlfriend left the country. Maybe they were living as expats in Mexico or something, and that's why he couldn't be found in the U.S. But they wanted contact with Byron to know he was okay. So they set up a Facebook page and started using social media to try to find him. In the meantime, Michelle had moved on. Months after Byron supposedly left her, she met a man named Joel Donahue. Joel was the opposite of Byron in pretty much every way. He was younger, 4 years younger than Michelle, and he liked to go out. He was a party guy, and Michelle's party ways were coming back now that she was separated from Byron. Michelle moved Joel into the house pretty quickly, and they married in 2007. And the two basically just spent Byron's money. They really blew through it. Michelle sold the property next to the one she lived at, and she sold Byron's cars. So she had over $200,000 to spend, and that's exactly what they did. They went to Hawaii and Las Vegas. They went out constantly. They gambled at the casinos, and they remodeled the home. When that money ran out, Michelle started putting everything on credit cards. Those bills soon became overwhelming, so Michelle took out a mortgage on the paid-off house and property to then pay down the credit card debt. But then she had to take a job as a server at a casino to now make these mortgage payments. Joel and Michelle managed to live large for a few years, but it definitely didn't last, at least not for Michelle. Joel, according to Michelle's complaints to friends, was bumming off of her. He had all but stopped working. He was, again, according to her, doing drugs, and the only money he made was from running a chop shop out of Byron's workshop. By 2013, Joel and Michelle were still living at the property together, but the relationship was all but over. Michelle resented Joel and basically stayed in the house drinking whenever she wasn't working. And Joel had rather brazenly moved a younger woman onto the property, a woman who was pregnant with his child. Things were beyond tense between them, and Joel's friends who worked at the chop shop on the property started getting nervous. At least one of them did, and we're going to call him Christopher. Christopher knew Michelle was angry at Joel, particularly after he started parading around his affair. So Christopher was worried that Michelle might do something to get revenge. If she called the police on the stolen car parts or the drug activity, they were all going to jail because they were all involved. One day, Christopher told a man who worked there, Mike, about his concerns, and Mike told him, "Don't worry about it." There was no way Michelle would ever call the cops because she had an even bigger secret than some stolen car parts. He said that Michelle had killed someone and the body was buried on the property. He knew about it, Joel knew about it, and at least one other person did as well. Michelle would be out of her mind to welcome a police presence. Christopher took in this information, and it did feel like a bit of a shield against Michelle calling the cops, but when Christopher found himself getting arrested for stealing cars anyway, he used this same information as a tool. While in lockup in December of 2013, Christopher said he wanted to talk to investigators because he had information about a murder. They met with him on December 26th, and Christopher told them what he knew, which honestly was not much. It sounds like he didn't even know the name of the person who was buried on the property, and the police were not able to link it to any known victim or missing person. They certainly didn't have enough for a search warrant for the property based on "some guy told me there's a body there." Not 100% sure they believed Christopher, they asked him if he would wear a wire to get more information, and he agreed. But before they opened that cell door, they also fitted him with a GPS monitor because they were not taking any chances that he was playing with them and using this as an opportunity to get out of jail and flee. The investigators then needed a strategy for Christopher to bring up the body on the property to Mike. If he was too obvious about it or sounded like he was trying to pry information, Mike would get suspicious. But they soon came up with an idea based on a local current event. In January of 2014, it hit the papers that a man was found buried on his property in Washington. The reason this was front page news was that the man was Dennis Lilly, who had escaped a Missouri prison in 1986. He escaped without much drama. He just put on a guard's uniform and walked out the door during shift change. He was profiled on America's Most Wanted, but he was never found, or at least not found, alive. They found out what happened to Dennis Lilly because in the fall of 2013, a woman named Amanda Murray filled out an online application to get into online stock trading. But her social security number and date of birth did not connect with her name of Amanda Murray, so a fraud investigation was triggered unbeknownst to her. It turned out that social security number and date of birth belonged to a woman named Mary Reedy Lilly, a woman who had married Dennis Lilly while he was incarcerated. After he escaped, Mary claimed she had no idea where he went and did not have any contact with him, but then, 6 months later, she disappeared as well. After learning this, the brokerage compliance officer sent all of this to the FBI. They looked more into Amanda Murray and found that she had applied for a replacement Social Security card several months earlier for the number that she had as Mary Lilly, and then she went to change her name to Amanda Murray so the number and the name would match up. Apparently not all of that had processed, which is why a red flag was thrown up on the brokerage's side of things. The FBI agents then took to the internet and they actually found Amanda Murray's Facebook page. Based on some family photos she posted, her husband Dave looked a lot like Dennis Lilly, only older and with a beard. And Amanda looked exactly like you would expect Mary Lilly to look all those years later. The Facebook postings also told the investigators that Dave had died at some point in 2012. The posts on his personal page stopped, and Amanda was fielding condolences on her page. The FBI agents ended up going to the business that Mary owned and found her there. They called her Mary instead of Amanda, and she froze for a second before she said no one had called her that in years. Mary was initially hesitant to give the agents the full story because she didn't want to get into any trouble, but she eventually told them that she and Dennis were together for many years while he was on the run, and they even had a daughter together, but they eventually separated. Dennis came back in 2009 telling her that he was terminally ill with cancer and he wanted to be with family. He died in June of 2012, and in order to cover up his real identity, she told everyone that he was cremated, but she actually buried him under a shed in the backyard, which she said was his wish because he didn't want her to get into trouble for harboring a fugitive. So, in January, just weeks after Christopher told the police his story, the Dennis Lilly story was front page news. And if you want to prod someone into talking about a body buried on a property somewhere, this article would get that conversation started. Christopher took the paper out to Michelle and Joel's place and started reading the article to Mike. If they found that body, who's to say they won't find the one on the property they were standing on? And this ploy worked. Mike said there was no way the police would find the body because, quote, it's under concrete. Mike then started talking and giving details, his first-hand account, because he was there when the body was buried, or rather when it was reburied. According to Mike, the body had initially been buried under a large amount of dirt, but then, when Michelle started having financial problems, she was worried the property was going to be foreclosed on. She told Joel that she had killed her abusive husband and buried him on the property, and if they lost it, the body would be found. So Joel went to the hardware store and bought the biggest plastic tote he could find, and then he recruited Mike and another friend to help him move Byron's body. Mike said that the body had been dismembered and was in a few different bags, but he did not look in any of them. They put most of the body into the tote and then dug up the floor of the workshop. They dug down 6 feet before putting the tote in there and then other bags of body parts next to it. Mike said they went down 6 feet because they heard that was past the point where ground-penetrating radar could detect anomalies. They then backfilled the hole and repoured the section of the concrete floor that they had destroyed. Christopher asked whose idea it was to bury the body under the garage, and Mike said it was Michelle and Joel's. While still wearing the wire, Christopher went with Mike to pick Michelle up from work, and they kept talking. And then when Michelle got in the car, the conversation shifted away from Byron and towards her current complaints about Joel. It's not surprising she was complaining about him because one of the reasons Michelle needed a ride home from work was that Joel had totaled her car. And that's on top of spending her money, not working, moving his pregnant girlfriend onto the property, and all the other ways Michelle felt mistreated by her husband. She said she wished there was a way to get rid of him. And then she said something the police couldn't understand, and then the word murder. Now, she could have been saying she didn't want him to be murdered, or she could have said she did want him to be murdered. It's too garbled because they were in a car and there was background noises. But figuring Mike was just on the wire saying that Michelle killed her other husband, dismembered him, and buried him on the property, the authorities didn't think Michelle was saying, let's not murder someone. Using this evidence from the wire, they got a search warrant for the property, and they arrested both Joel and Michelle Donahue on February 13th, 2014. The arrests were initially for possession of stolen property for all the stolen car parts, but we know that they were there looking for the body of a murder victim. Joel did not go quietly and had to be tased, but Michelle did not resist arrest, and she agreed to talk to the police at the station. Michelle was under the impression that this was all about Joel's activities, so that is what she talked about. She claimed she was not involved in anything happening in the detached garage, and she wasn't even involved with Joel anymore. She said she was in the process of figuring out what she needed to do for a legal separation and to get him off her property, and she even pointed to Joel's new girlfriend as proof she was not connected to anything involving him. As the detectives questioned Michelle, they asked if she had been married before she married Joel, and she said she had been twice. When she mentioned her former husband, Byron, they asked where he was, and she said she didn't know. He had taken off 9 years earlier, and she just hadn't heard from him since. They asked a few more questions about Byron, and Michelle asked why they were so interested in him. They told her that they knew she had something weighing on her and she needed to get it off her chest. And then they said that Joel was in the other interrogation room telling them all about how Byron was buried on the property. Michelle acted shocked, or maybe she was shocked that Joel would rat her out, perhaps, but that was in fact what he was doing. It's possible he was using it as leverage to get out of his own legal trouble, or maybe he started talking because they told him that they were worried Michelle was going to have him killed next. Regardless of his why, Joel told the police what he knew. And that was that Michelle told him that she stabbed Byron during an argument in the kitchen, but she claimed it was self-defense. Afraid of getting in trouble, she buried his body before she even met Joel, and she was only telling Joel about it because she needed help moving Byron's remains. Joel admitted to everything Mike said happened, including buying the tote and digging up the workshop floor. So the investigators told Michelle that Joel told them how she killed Byron, and she stammered. They said that this was her chance to tell her side of the story before they found Byron's body, and Michelle asked for a lawyer. They sent her to a holding cell while they continued the search of the property. One thing you can see in the photos of this search is that Byron's property was absolutely trashed. His favorite place that he was so proud of had been treated like a garbage pit by Joel, Michelle, and their friends. Once inside the workshop, it was pretty easy to see where they needed to concentrate their digging. Joel's concrete pouring was not nearly as good as whoever did the original floor, so it was obvious which area was his handiwork. They broke through the concrete and made it about 6 feet down when they found a blue tote full of concrete and containing Byron's torso and head. There were 2 other bags next to the tote that had his limbs. On autopsy, the medical examiner determined that Byron had suffered multiple stab wounds to the upper back and head. The story Michelle told Joel about it being self-defense seemed unlikely since Byron had been attacked from behind. Michelle Donahue was then charged with second-degree murder. The investigators very quickly built up an irrefutable case against her. They had Joel and Mike as witnesses. They had the receipt from when Michelle ordered soil on September 18, 2004, telling the company she was building a sledding hill for her daughter, telling others the dirt was for gardening, and telling Joel that's where she buried Byron's body. They also heard from another witness who said Michelle said she stabbed Byron during an argument, and when he asked her to call an ambulance, she said she would do it if he apologized. He didn't apologize, so she left for work, and he bled out while she was gone. That is one version of what happened. An investigator told the TV show Diabolical that he didn't believe it. Byron was found in his underwear and wrapped in a sheet. He believed that Michelle had attacked Byron while he slept in a premeditated act, killing him because their relationship was cooling and she was worried that the mostly free ride was coming to an end. The investigator didn't think it was a coincidence that Byron was killed while Michelle's daughter, who lived there, was out of the country. That gave Michelle time to kill Byron, dismember him, and clean up. To him, that sounded like a plan. But the state did not believe they could prove premeditation. So the case was only ever going to be prosecuted as a second-degree murder, and 5 months after her arrest, Michelle pleaded guilty. In exchange for not putting Byron's family through a trial, the prosecutor agreed to recommend a 15-year sentence, which was only 3 years shy of the 18-year maximum for someone convicted of that charge without a previous criminal record. Michelle admitted to stabbing and dismembering Byron, saying at sentencing that she was sorry, that she didn't plan it, and that she realized that Byron's death was preventable if she knew how to deal with her anger. Byron's family provided impact statements to the judge, telling him about how kind and silly and gentle Byron was. They pointed out that after Michelle finished manipulating Byron, she manipulated the family, and now she was manipulating the court system to serve only 15 years for a brutal murder. The judge decided to sentence Michelle to 16 years in prison, 1 year longer than the recommended sentence through the plea deal. He could have gone all the way up to the maximum of 18 years, but then Michelle wouldn't have the same post-release supervision that she would get with a 16-year sentence. But 15 years, 16 years, 18 years, none of that was enough for Byron's family, and honestly, it sounds like the judge agreed. But he acknowledged the state could not have proven that this was first-degree murder at trial, and he was bound by sentencing laws. To keep Michelle in prison for as long as he could, while also making sure the community was protected by keeping Michelle supervised after release, he went with the 16 years. One of the things that seems just so wrong in this case is that Michelle got to spend Byron's money and enjoy his property for nearly 10 years, and she isn't serving a whole lot more than that in prison. And due to the statute of limitations, Joel and his friends were not charged for concealing Byron's body, so they just got away with their involvement in it. And then you have to think about the deputy who did not enter Byron as a missing person or investigate what happened to him 5 years before his body was found. This could have been resolved sooner for the sake of the family if the deputy had acted. This is just a case plagued by unfairness. As of this recording in November of 2025, Michelle Donahue is still incarcerated. She will be eligible for release as early as 2028, and she will definitely be released by 2030 when she is 65 years old.